How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it with our latest Big Mets update segment. And oh boy, do we have a lot to get into right here, right now. We were just live a couple hours ago breaking down the reunion of Jesse Winker returning to Queens, and how latest reporting per Andy Martino did state that yes, the Mets are pivoting away from Pete Alonso. Well, we have found out further detail as to why exactly that is. Why is Alonso nowhere close with the Mets on a deal, as he has rejected their latest offer, which was a counter from his initial proposal that was an exclusive deal to just the Mets. That is what we're going to deep dive in today's show. The details on what exactly was this offer from the Mets. Why do they value him the way that they do versus how Alonso and Scott Boras perceive himself, and how the Toronto Blue Jays, among other teams, are actively involved in the Alonso market. They would love to pair him with, yes, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. We're going to touch on the latest with Vladdy and the rumblings with the Mets, extension talks or lack thereof, as well as what the Mets may potentially do as a pivot option should Alonso officially be out of town. Let me see your initial reactions to it all in the comments down below, everybody. Thank you so much for smashing that like and subscribe button, chiming into our live stream from earlier today. Make sure to check it out when you guys get a chance, in case you haven't already, because we deep dived a lot there, as well as hearing from our amazing sponsor at BetUS that has you covered with all your sports betting needs. Head over to betus.com.pa today, folks, is if you guys want to get involved in sports betting, but you want to make sure you do it the right way, the smart way, and the safe way, please make sure you guys bet responsibly by going over there and using our promo code YouTube150. That way YouTube will get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, $125 on your second and your third, up to $2,000 for whatever you want to bet on. And folks, I'm doing a simple money line OKC Thunder straight at -130 to win this game. This is a $50 bet that hopefully will give me a $90 payout should OKC win tonight in their matchup. Good luck to anyone that is tailing this bet, but please know I'm not a sports betting expert, just a diehard fan that loves to place daily bets for the NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB when the season comes around, you name it. And we're going to have a lot of Mets related bets as we get into the regular season. But I digress, folks. Let's now jump in this and let's get into the news, because a lot has transpired. And let's go in order here, because like I mentioned, the Mets brought back Jesse Winker, which is awesome. Very happy to see him back in that platoon outfield and DH role, and he will be splitting time with stalemate, barring changes for that DH position. But now let's get into the latest reporting as to why are the Mets pivoting from Pete Alonso. How did we reach this point now where it felt inevitable for a very long period of time that Alonso would return to Queens? And I do still think that there is a world where Pete Alonso is a Met on opening day, but that world feels far less likely than what it's ever felt like up until this point. And let's get into why exactly that is. Because first, we see some tremendous reporting that comes out earlier today from Will Salmon there on the beat for the Mets through The Athletic, along with Ken Rosenthal. They dropped their latest piece on The Athletic, not only regarding Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the Toronto Blue Jays' interest in Alonso that we'll touch on in the second half of our segment today, but in the first half, it's on Alonso, because as you guys can see here, the Mets countered Alonso's initial exclusive 3-year high AAV offer with opt-outs. For context, Alonso is not currently presenting any other team with this type of contract structure where you have around 3 years with opt-outs. Every other team, it is not being presented in that manner. To what degree? We have heard rumblings that the Blue Jays may be willing to go farther than the Mets are certainly willing, and we'll touch on that a little bit later in here. But the Mets proposed a straight-up 3-year contract, and Alonso denied it. Now, the big question is, why did Alonso deny it? That is a big question that a lot of people have had, and this is a simple reason as to why. As we just scroll up right here, Joel Sherman just dropped his latest piece right before I hit record on this video, which was perfect timing to find out the details here, that yes, the reason why Alonso and the Mets are nearing a divorce is because, based on what Joel Sherman has reported, the Mets have only offered Pete Alonso a 3-year contract in this $68 million to $7 million range. This is right around $23 million of average annual value, and this is way off from what Alonso was seeking on his exclusive deal, which was presumed right around 3 years, $90+ million, so right around $30 million AAV, with an opt-out after that first and or second seasons. The Mets want security with Alonso, which is why they offered him a 3-year deal without opt-outs. It's also telling that the Mets are willing to commit to Alonso the next 3+ years, even if that means that there's a lesser likelihood of them landing Vladimir Guerrero Jr., say, next offseason, because they have stability, at least in the short short term at first base. The Mets have never wanted to go 4, 5, 6 years to Alonso. That's why they're in the 3 range. But for Alonso and Scott Boras, they not only probably feel slighted, but I'm sure to a degree they feel like they've been smacked across the face, as Alonso is in fact being compared to, yes, Christian Walker. As Christian Walker, the veteran first baseman going from the Arizona Diamondbacks to the Houston Astros, inked a 3-year, $60 million deal this offseason. And there was a long belief that, okay, you can't do wrong by Alonso and comp him to Christian Walker, who's like 4, 5 plus years older, at least 3, 4 years older there, and isn't as high upside as Alonso. Well, the Mets are essentially doing that to a degree. They still view him higher than Christian Walker, but they don't think that he's out of the Christian Walker group of being a short-term first base fit. What does that tell you? What we have known all along. The Mets, David Stern, Steve Cohen, everyone here, they love Alonso. They would like him to return, but they have no problem with allowing Alonso to walk if he does not meet the demands that they're looking for. And the fact that we're at a gap right now of at least $20+ million might seem petty. I know some of you guys are probably saying we are doing completely wrong by Pete Alonso here. He does not deserve this treatment whatsoever. How are we only offering 3 years at $70 million? He doesn't deserve such a low ball. But here's the problem, everybody. And again, I know some you guys aren't going to want to hear this, and as someone who wants Alonso to return, I don't even want to hear it myself, but it's a reality. The Mets are going to do what's best for the organization here. And in the case of Alonso, after bringing in Juan Soto, they know that they can properly allocate those dollars to a degree elsewhere to either make the team better defensively and have some offensive upside still outside of losing Alonso for 2025. Fortifying their bullpen and going all in on a Tanner Scott that they've been heavily linked to, especially as of today, based on recent reporting. But simply, Scott Boras and Pete Alonso, they value themselves on the more longer-term front. Alonso is kicking himself in the foot more than anyone on how did I deny a $160 million extension by the Mets a year and a half ago from Billy Epler at the trade deadline. Even with buying out the RBers, that was still in the range far more of what he's currently being presented by teams. And this is where the Toronto Blue Jays that we'll get into have a chance to really pounce here should they wish, as the Mets are properly pivoting. And the reason why the Mets are pivoting is because, yes, they have a hard line in the sand. And I know you might be saying to yourself, Wardy, how does it at all make sense for the Mets to not want to go past 370? Well, it's a couple things. It's one, it's the market. Whether you like it or not, the market has not been in Alonso's favor. And the fact that the Mets aren't willing to go beyond this is telling of exactly why every other team in Major League Baseball is more than likely not willing to go there either. There are true concerns about Alonso's true projection throughout a 162, given how much of a profile of a player he is, and knowing that if he loses his power, he has nothing of his game left. Let's keep it a buck here. As much as we love Alonso, he's heavily reliant on that power, and without that, he's very little. He is not a high-quality hitter. He's actually only down He has only downgraded significantly his quality, his actual at-bats, and how he's went about his hand-eye and really locking in on pitches to not chase out of the zone. We've seen Alonso have the consistent power, but the problem has been his approach at the plate. That's why he's had back-to-back down offensive years from his personal norms in his first 3-4 years in the league versus what we saw in 2023 and 2024. And then as we got into postseason, he snapped out of it. That was amazing. We're all grateful for that. But the reason why the Mets also are not even presenting opt-outs to Alonso goes directly in hand with what they saw in 2024. Alonso couldn't handle the pressure. As much as I've been preaching to many of you guys saying, listen, if Alonso signs, say, a 3-year deal with opt-outs, it's not really as high pressure of a situation because he still has the comfort of knowing that he will be with the Mets another year should he wish. But maybe I'm wrong for that to a degree, because here's another reality. He still technically is on that 1-year deal if he has an opt-out after the first year where he's determined to opt out. The entire purpose as to why Alonso approached solely the Mets with this is because he wants to return to Queens, he wants to have a comfortable year with the Mets, and he wants to opt out again and look for a bigger bag. The problem, though, is that we saw how Alonso did not fare well with the high pressure as a Scott Boras client in a walk year last year. By all counts, he was the most unclutched batter in this Mets lineup up until he simply was the opposite against Devin Williams and then had himself a tremendous postseason run. And I will never forget that postseason run by Alonso, and that means so much to me as a fan. But here's the thing. The 162 still stands out, and that's how the team is going to evaluate Pete to a degree here, and that's what goes in hand with the 370. Because one, they don't like the idea of having him opt out after the first year, because why do the Mets want to have to go through this again? I think that's a fair thing that we should question ourselves, because it's not like Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is a lock, like it's a guarantee. It might be closer to a lock than anything else if the Mets really go all in on him next offseason, but nothing's a slam dunk. We don't know it until we know it, right? Same thing as Steve Cohen didn't know he was landing Juan Soto until he found out that he was officially landing Juan Soto. So with that uncertainty as to what the Mets' first base position would be after a year, I can see why the Mets want more certainty there, knowing that they can shift Alonso to DH or trade him if they sign Vladdy a year from now, even with Alonso under contract. They can still go down that route and do whatever they please because they're the Mets and Steve Cohen and they have the money to do it. But the fact that the Mets are hung up at right around 20, let's say, arguably for argument's sake, at least 20 to 25 mil of total value and a gap on a contract, that they're not willing to go. So much so that they're willing to allow Alonso to walk and go elsewhere. The reason why the Mets are willing to do this is clearly their confidence in replacing Alonso's value as a player for 2025 at minimum, should he not return. They clearly want him back. The fact that they didn't offer opt-outs is further telling that they love Alonso still at the prime age of his career right now, entering his age 30 season, but they don't love Alonso beyond 3 years, and who can fault them for that? The same way that I don't fault Alonso to a degree for wanting to get his bag and wanting something better. The problem for Alonso and the problem for Scott Boras, they've overplayed their hand in a market that has not been in their favor. But as we touch a little bit more on this, everybody, it cannot be forgotten here on how the Mets first approached Alonso, how Alonso first approached the Mets, and how even after Alonso went the lengths of saying, hey, I will take a shorter term deal just for you, even including opt-outs, that isn't even to the satisfaction of David Stearns and Steve Cohen. So this is just further telling to me as to exactly why the Mets are pivoting. It's because any rational fan can say in confidence from what's being reported that unless Alonso circles back to the Mets, which I honestly think he will when everything is said and done, knocking on wood barring changes here. Again, I could be wrong. This might be it with Alonso for all we know. But this Alonso situation is so unique because David Stearns has all the right in the world to say, go out, Pete. Go out. Test the market. See what you're going to find, and then let us know, or don't let us know. Good luck with your future endeavors if we really can't land something here. That is how confident David Stearns and the Mets are, and not only replacing Alonso immediately on the short term, but also how confident that they are that the market isn't in his favor. And that's where Alonso and Boras are at fault here. You're all about trying to get your bag. That's Scott Boras' job for Alonso. I understand that, but there's also something to understand about overplaying your hand. We've seen this with countless Scott Boras clients in recent years, most notably, most recently, Blake Snell, Matt Chapman, Jordan Montgomery, and 2 out of those 3 did get longer-term deals after initially signing those short-term deals with opt-outs, but it didn't go for everyone. Monty, it didn't work. Michael Conforto, another Scott Boras client, denied a Mets 7-year extension from Sandy Alderson in the first year there under Steve Cohen, and then Conforto there is hurt for an entire year with his shoulder, and then he has to settle with short-term deals for the remainder of his career after looking back and probably saying, damn, I wish I opted into that long-term deal to stay with the Mets, right? So this is also not out of the realm of possibility that Scott Boras has overplayed things, specifically with current or former Mets now that are actively in the free agent market. And how this pairs with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is very interesting to me that I want to touch on here in just 1 second, everybody. But before I do, I also want to look at my notes selfishly real quick just to make sure that I didn't miss any key point. Lazo represented only Mets exclusive offer. Talked about that. Mets struggle potential walk year. Won't be stable. Yep. Okay. We touched on literally everything. Fantastic. So now let's get into the Vladimir Guerrero news, because we did see in the latest piece again through The Athletic with both Ken Rosenthal and Will Salmon, The Athletic, and Will was on our platform just over a week ago in our live stream. He's been a reoccurring guest doing a fantastic job there on the beat for the Mets. And Will did make note here that both him and Ken have heard, and this is complete contrast to what I talked about in Bleacher Report earlier today, not only on Alonso, but on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as well. Check out that BR segment. I'm an MLB host there for our MLB daily segments, 4 p.m. sharp Eastern, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every single week, all year long. I piggyback and come after John Heyman has his guest spot every other day, right around 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 p.m. sharp there, covering not just the Mets, but MLB-wide topics every single day. We highlighted more on Alonso and the Vladdy latest, and I touched on this, how, again, you have people like a part of the Toronto Blue Jays organization, that being a Nicholson Smith here, reporting that the Blue Jays are actively negotiating an extension with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Now, what's interesting is a couple things. One, Vladdy is reportedly having denied 3 contract offers by the Blue Jays already when talking about extension talks, with one of them having heavy deferred payments. That comes from recent reporting out of Toronto's camp. Then we come to find out, and this reporting through both Ken and Will Salmon, that apparently there has been no extension talks since before Christmas, or right around there, the holiday season, for the Toronto Blue Jays front office. So that is completely opposite to what the other report was. So I will let you guys leave it up to what you want to believe versus who's more credible, who's not, the people of the Athletic, or a guy that's essentially a part of the Jays organization, a part of TSN there, if I'm not mistaken, and Mr. Nicholson Smith, Sportsnet rather. Sportsnet and TSN, those are like the go-to 1-2 punches, not only for hockey coverage, but for all major sports coverage there in Canada and Toronto especially. So I'll let you guys interpret that however you will, but in the article from The Athletic, it does go on to state that the Toronto Blue Jays are not only pursuing Pete Alonso, but there is a possibility that they can approach Alonso closer to the extension that he denied from the Mets a year and a half ago than any other team. And that's true. The Blue Jays are desperate. Bregman's already denied a lot of their dollars, in which apparently the highest and longest offer on the table has been from Toronto to Bregman, and he said no. Santander hasn't bit to this point on the Toronto front, and you can obviously see why. There's a lot of reluctance for players to want to commit here, but Alonso, if he is desperate enough, and Toronto is too, this could be a match made in heaven for both sides. And the reason why is the article goes on to state that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. actually encourages the idea to play at the third base position in 2025. He wants to show his ability to be as versatile as possible and to be at least capable at third base in 2025 while having Alonso at first base / DH, so that way it increases Vladdy's value when he hits the free agent market next offseason, because he's not extending with the Blue Jays. I don't know how many times Blue Jays fans need to hear this and continue to be in this delusional mindset like he's a slam dunk to be extended. If he gets extended before the regular season, okay, you're absolutely right, and I'm sorry for doubting you. But until that happens, I'm going to continue to doubt that notion for a great reason. Vladdy wants a bag. If he shows an ability to be at least a capable third baseman, his value is going to increase significantly, and that's where the $500+ million range does become a greater reality for Vladdy should he sign a 10+ year contract with the Mets, with the Red Sox, or go back to Toronto on a big overpay, whatever it may be. But the Blue Jays are targeting Alonso because they want to pair him with Vladdy. It's not because they want to make Vladdy more expendable, even though he would inevitably become that should they in fact acquire Alonso. This would allow them to pair as a 1-2 punch of some big sluggers there in the AL East to go up against the Yankees, Red Sox, Orioles, Rays, you name it, and try to make themselves a playoff push, trying to crack that wild card range there out of what is a very weak American League. And honestly, they acquired Alonso. I think it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to get there because of just how weak that American League is. But that AL East is very tough, and that's where, okay, they brought in Alonso. It's hard to not envision the Red Sox maybe showing a little bit more desperation and bringing in Bregman then, even though Bregman could make sense for the Mets short-term high AV if he's willing to go there. But all reports at this point is that he's not at this point in time. So we need to get Bregman on the page of like Alonso willing to take a 3-year deal potentially with opt-outs as a fit for this Mets team. Because do I think the Toronto Blue Jays are going to land Alonso? I'll have to see it to believe it. It feels so hard to imagine Alonso signing anywhere else outside of Queens if it's going to be short-term high AV with opt-outs, because why would it make it all sense for him to go somewhere for a short period of time in a high-stressed year where he knows he's trying to opt out again to hit the free agent market when he could suffer just like he did in 2024 with the Mets, but worse, with a team that he has no familiarity with, no comfortability with, anything like that. Here's the thing. Remember when I told you guys that Alonso exclusively offered the Mets that contract, including opt-outs? That's because Alonso more than likely would not sign a short-term contract if he landed in Toronto. He would sign a contract more along the 4 to 6 year range, pushing, again, trying to get at least $130+ million, which is what he would have gotten outside of arbitration there if he extended with the Mets on that value, which was around 160, but you're buying out an RBer, so it's really like 130, 135. If he gets around that range from the Blue Jays, that might be enough for Pete Alonso to say, hey, I'm comfortable, this is what I want, this is what I've been looking for, and now let's go and play baseball. And if that's the case, then that tells you all you need to know what Alonso's priorities are here and how he views not only his future, but also how he perceives the Mets and maybe how he's felt slighted to a degree on their lack of willingness to want to commit to him long term. I understand both sides here. I really do. I understand the stubbornness by Stearns and the Mets, while I also understand Alonso wanting a bag, and understandably so. And I also understand, and this is what I'll leave you with, everybody, we know that the Mets are are actively in the process of pivoting. And after signing Jesse Winker, that's what makes the best available, not Alonso. the switch hitting Venezuelan slugger and Anthony Santander less and less likely unless A, you trade Marte or plan to trade him, and then want to use Jesse more so off the bench than anything else, as he would get very limited DH time with Santander there every day as a switch hitter that hit 44 bombs this past year, 3 consecutive years with at least 20 or more home runs. He's been very impressive. And the reason why I emphasize this is the Mets DH is essentially established now, barring changes, until we find out reports to suggest otherwise. It's going to be Winker facing righties, and it's going to be Marte facing lefties more often than not. Obviously, this is ever changing, but the point is, Santander, the biggest, the sexiest name of a big bat out there in the market, not named Alonso, that would be the closest thing to Alonso replacement on the power alone, is looking less and less likely to be a fit for the Mets, which leads us now to, if it's not going to be a guy like Bregman, you can't just stay in-house. We have heard that the Mets are willing to ship Vientos at first and Troy Beatty, Mauricio, and others there at the hot corner to see what sticks. I get that. And I also understand that I think it's true that when the Mets are done adding the bullpen, the Mets are absolutely a better team in 2025 without Alonso because they have Soto. Just for context, folks, you can combine numerous players, including Alonso from last year, and they will still not reach the total value per WAR that Soto was batting that lineup with Judge last season at over 8 wins above replacement. Soto's value alone is so much more significant than Alonso, but the point has been to pair them together. It has not been to want to have them separate. This Mets lineup is one of the best in the National League with Alonso back. Without Alonso, I think Vientos can thrive in similar fashion and give us 35 plus home runs out of first base, but the question mark at third base I think is so pronounced, at least to begin the year, that right there is where I think a lot of fans could have their rightful skepticism and say, hey, how in God's name are we going into a season where we have at least one position not solidified as to what we're doing there, where no one has properly solidified themselves as an everyday MLB player to warrant sticking in that position? It's a fair question, and I understand the lack of interest from fans when it comes to that, and I also understand if fans are saying, hey, David, we love what you've done, but if you do not replace Alonso with any other bat, we're going to have a problem. And that is where I find myself in the same category. You're still a bat short. That goes without saying. Got to get it done. Mets fans, let us know in the comments down below. How do you feel about the latest on Alonso rejecting the latest contract offer presented by the Mets at 3 years, $70 million or so? And how do you feel about the latest on the Vladimir Guerrero sweepstakes, along with everything else in Mets land? Let's hear in the comments down below. Thank you again, guys, so much for watching. And this is your guy, Wardy, signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace.